Tonight, we're so excited to be here at the bottom. This is a really sacred space for so many reasons. I'll run through the agenda quickly and then turn it over to Doretha and Khalil to introduce this space, what it is, but why it's so important too. After that, we'll talk a little bit about the history of the campaign. We'll get a presentation from the University of Tennessee Geography Department on the eviction crisis since the beginning of the pandemic. See some of the cool maps they've made. Our friends from Legal Aid will give a quick Know Your Rights presentation with the opportunity to continue to speak in private with some of them if you have specific confidential concerns about evictions or anything you want to share. And we'll then talk about one of the solutions that we're trying to put forward for this problem, which is instituting the right to counsel so every single person facing eviction gets access to a lawyer. And wrap it up with a discussion of what else do we need for housing justice in Knoxville. We're going to be getting food coming in soon. We'll figure out the logistics of that, but rest assured you will all get fed. And we really thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much to the bottom for all the work you've done to make this possible. And please tell us what we need to know.
All right, well, thank you so much. Hello, everyone. My name is Khalil White, and I'm the Executive Director here at the bottom. And this is Doretha Ben, who is our Grants and Development Director here. I want to thank you all for being here with us and being in the community with us. The bottom, as you see, is a bookstore, but we're also a community space. We are Black owned and ran. And our founding director created this space for Black people because there wasn't a lot of spaces for us to feel welcome, to feel like we belonged, and to just share our community culture and creativity amongst each other. So we do a lot through, of course, literacy. We also have a lot with our arts and communications department, and we do a lot just overall for the community. This is a space for you. It's not just our space. This is the community space. So please definitely come back and be in community with us. If you want to help and continue to support us, we are currently having our Literature is Liberation campaign going on. You can reach out and do donations in person or onto our socials and also our website. So I want to thank you all again for being here.
My name is Brady Watson. I work with Sockham and Adam and Lilith, and I'm also the chair of DSA, the local DSA chapter. But I'm going to give a brief history of the coalition and some of our work around housing justice here in Knoxville. We sort of started in 2020 in the midst of the pandemic because we saw a crisis that sort of continues now with folks being evicted and facing housing insecurity. And so basically we just organized some sort of impromptu events. We did some car caravans, we did some Counsel events, rallies, and eviction rallies. We had, at one point we did, we made this like fake award to award the highest evicting landlord in sort of a cheeky way. This person had evicted, I think, like 48 people in the year and sort of tried to get some publicity out of that, just to try to highlight some of the bad practices of landlords here in Knoxville. Like I said, we tried to get more attention on the crisis that people were facing during 2020 and 2021 during the height of the pandemic. And then we started doing canvassing as well, so we found a list of folks being evicted every week and tried to actually canvass those folks and get them information about resources that were available. And so we kind of went door to door around the city, especially in the hard-hit areas. And thankfully, during that time, the CDC issued a moratorium on evictions, and so that was actually a really good resource that could keep people in their homes that we tried to educate people about while we were canvassing. And that was something that we were able to take around. It lasted until, I think it was June of 2021, and that was something that people didn't know existed, but thankfully, and Adam could attest more to this, but folks would actually bring that CDC eviction moratorium paperwork to court and say, like, I was told I didn't have to leave, and so we know we could cut people in their homes in that way. So that was one thing we did. After the moratorium ended, obviously there's still a great need. Adam and some other folks were doing court watching. They would actually go to court and help people that were facing eviction. And then we kind of formalized in the summer of 2021 around the Knoxville Housing Justice Coalition, which consists of Sockham, DSA, PSL, and then KWDA, which is Knoxville Water and Energy for All, which is trying to make sure folks have access to utilities. But at that point, we formed and realized that obviously, even though folks no longer have the protection of the CDC moratorium, there's still a huge need, obviously. A lot of the housing assistance programs have run out, as folks in this room probably know and have experience with. And so what we sort of coalesced around was this right to counsel, which is basically making sure that folks facing eviction actually have resources and legal expertise to help them stay in their homes. And we also know from the data that if you have a legal resource, legal representation in court, your likelihood of staying in your home goes up exponentially. And so we sort of identified that as our campaign. Hopefully that's why y'all are here, to learn more, and that's something we'll talk about more later. We've also done some Know Your Rights trainings thanks to the folks from Legal Aid, and tried to get just as much information out to people as possible. And so hopefully we can get you all some more information tonight about resources and assistance that's available. We're going to try to kind of carry this campaign forward and make sure folks actually do have representation from legal experts to stay in their homes, because obviously it's not only more humane, but it's far more cost effective to just keep people housed than to try to find them housing after they've been evicted. And so that's a little bit of a brief background on the coalition. Again, if you haven't signed in, please do. And I'll pass it off to our next person, who is Wendy. Okay.
I'm Wendy Bach. I'm a professor at the law school. I've been working with SOCM on these issues, since the pandemic. We did some work around the various moratorium and things. And then we've been sort of figuring out how we can provide technical assistance to some of these campaigns. Recently, we were funded by a community university partnership from UT to work some more on these, so we're working with Dr. Luke and SOCM on that. But what they wanted me to talk about is, as part of that work, a lot of jurisdictions have gotten to the right to counsel, passed statutes, gotten counsel. The programs look all different depending on what you're looking at. Some of them are state, some of them are city. They have lots of different things. But as part of educating ourselves around what's going around in the country, we were connected to a lot of folks who were doing this in other jurisdictions. And we found out of an opportunity called the Road to Counsel Sprint, which is a technical assistance program for folks who on the National Civil Right to Counsel provide for jurisdictions. And we found out about that, and we were invited to put together a team for Knoxville to learn. It's just technical assistance. That kind of leveraged us to be able to approach some folks that hadn't been a part of our conversations. So we got the city and the county and the United Way and some organizing groups who we've already talked about, and some nonprofits just in a room together for about 12 weeks, once a week, to learn. So that group has been learning, going on these sessions, learning about what's going on around the country, learning about the data, learning about the effectiveness. So we were psyched because it was an opportunity and sort of excited that the government agencies were willing to come to that conversation. So they're at the table in some way, which is good news. So that's the sprint, and let's see what questions.
Yeah, you said that the government agencies are at the table. That's a good thing. But I'm just trying to understand how that's a good thing when it sounds like the community part of this is still not fully been vetted. Like, who are these organizational partners that y'all chose? Who are these people?
Well, it was SOCM is the primary organizing partner that's at the table, but it's just Legal Aid, as part of this. This is just for folks to learn some of this technical stuff. We have access to all of this, and we can share whatever we're learning. But it was a sort of quick opportunity, and it gave us a way to ask the city and the county, do you want to learn about this?
Did it bring any true leverage to the table?
We'll see.
So you're still working on it?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Hi everybody, thanks so much for being here. I should have printed more copies of these handouts, but my email address is on the back. If you want to get a copy of it, you can send me an email. It's some of the preliminary data that we've collected. So I'm Nikki Luke, I'm an assistant professor in the geography department, and I'm joined by some of my colleagues.
I'm Anna, I'm a master's student in geography.
And I'm Latia, I'm also a first year master's student in geography.
And so we've been really fortunate to have lots of students who have been supporting this project on trying to do the very difficult and time-consuming work of trying to understand what's happening with eviction in Knox County, going through handwritten court records and trying to make that into a more decipherable form so that we can get to some of those questions that help us look at the more geographic scale of where things are happening. Lots of geographers have approached these questions thinking about how to work with tenants that are facing change in their neighborhoods, that are facing housing unaffordability. And so we've been reaching out to colleagues around the country to try to understand the best methods to do this. And have gone through this process of trying to distill these records from the court in collaboration with many of the partners who have also been mentioned. We are really grateful to Legal Aid for helping us understand some of the court narration, to try to create a public-facing dashboard that presents some of this information about where we see the greatest number of eviction filings. So when a detainer warrant is filed, this is like the first step where that a person who's going through eviction, it's recorded in a public place. And so we have gathered all that data and are working to understand how many of those cases ultimately end up in someone losing their housing, which requires, again, going through all of those handwritten records. And we've, through that process, identified a geographic distribution for where we see eviction happening across the city. And very clear hotspots, particularly in the Inskip neighborhood of North Knoxville. Nearly 1 in 8 renting households have received a detainer warrant in one census tract. So that means 1 in 8 people have faced eviction through the legal court system. And what we know, based on other research happening across the country, is that for evictions that go through the court, there are an equal number of people who are forced out of their home through other means that aren't necessarily, that's kind of a number that housing scholars use to think about just this process of whereby people have to leave their housing. What we've also identified through this process, which is part of why Right to Counsel is so and this campaign has tried to address, is the inequality that people face in the courtroom. So from the cases that we've processed so far, nearly 57% of landlords have an attorney, compared to only 4.5% of tenants. And so really expanding and equalizing the playing ground for tenants is about addressing some of these processes and getting and expanding access to legal representation. Are there other things?
I just wanted to talk a little bit about the work that I do. So a lot of the graphics created here by Anna, and in order to get that information, we have both been going through handwritten court documents, which are sometimes just incomplete with the information. There's a lot of information missing. Sometimes the handwriting is difficult, yeah, it's definitely difficult to read, but we're looking for addresses, we're looking for any mention of why these individuals are being evicted. Sometimes there's no mention, and that kind of leads us to believe that maybe it's not all about money, maybe it's not because, they're not paying their rent. Perhaps it could be, we just don't want you to be here because we want to sell this property so that we can sell this land and make more money. So we're looking at all of this information from the court documents to try and just create a bigger picture.
And I would just add, as the slides are going around the room, these data are only from 2020 to 2022. We're working as fast as we can to get as updated information as we can, because during that time period there was a moratorium, and that very likely had an impact on these numbers. And so also there are a lot of unknowns, just mentioning, so those numbers.
And one more thing I'll say that you can see in the data is that, and we've seen this again across the country, is that because of the eviction moratorium and because of rental assistance that was provided through the emergency rental assistance program, the number of people who went through the eviction process declined in 2020 and 2021. and that number has gone back up with some of the emergency measures that were put in place due to the pandemic. Now that those have been lifted, we're seeing a return to higher levels of people facing, going through the court system, even though like we know that lots of people are still facing the effects of the pandemic. And so as was mentioned already, each week in housing court there's upwards of 100 cases of people of different eviction cases.
So, but while we're doing this, I'm going to pass out this new resource that we're launching. This is our 18-page eviction defense guide. Students at UT in the sociology department and the legal department have put this together. We've gotten it reviewed by lawyers for like factual accuracy and everything. And we want this to be a community resource for anyone who may be facing eviction, who wants to know more about what your rights are, what the process is. We also have some one-page versions that are easier to give out, but I want everyone who wants to go home with one of these 18-page guides to be able to. So I'll pass them out. They might help the conversation. Question?
Is it possible to get a PDF of this?
Yes, it is.
Like how?
I will. Did you sign in?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yes, I'll make sure to send out a PDF to everyone, and we're going to be spreading this as publicly as possible. We want this to be like anyone who wants to share it, anyone who wants copies, anyone who wants to print their own copies has access to it. We think, and we know already that the information in here has worked to keep people in their houses. So I'll pass these out, but I will introduce Legal Aid of East Tennessee.
Hey everybody, good to see you all today. My name is Michael Davis.
My name is Emily Caroline.
Work for Legal Aid of East Tennessee. Hopefully we haven't met you in court, but we've met a lot of people over the past few years, unfortunately. So what we're, first off, to just recognize like how much great effort's going on here just to have people here today, the organizations that's gone into this, the work that has gone into the Right to Counsel effort, and especially this data gathering that the geographers are putting together at UT. That's literally like chiseling something out of stone. This has not been done before. This is cut of completely new ground. And with that data, hopefully we can get some really important things done. But we're here to talk about legal rights that you have as a tenant. This may apply to you, this may apply to people you know. We're not giving any specific advice to anybody. We can't do that today just for our ethical professional guidelines. But we can talk about general information. This guide has a lot of what we're going to talk about in it. So take one of those, get the PDF later, spread that information around because it's really valuable to people in the community.
Just kind of starting out the basics. What does it mean to be evicted, and what rights do you have from the beginning? So first things first, you cannot be removed from your home without going to court. So some people get confused. They'll receive a letter in the mail saying they're being evicted, they need to be out by this day. Your landlord can't just come by on that day if you're not out yet and just say, all right, move all your stuff out, you're gone. They can't change the locks, they can't turn off your utilities. That is illegal, that's called constructive eviction. You have to go through the court process first, and that's really important for people to know because I think that a lot of times, when we talk about the statistics and how we said that for every one household that gets a detainer warrant, there's another one that doesn't, that they have to move. That other household is somebody who doesn't realize that they have legal rights, and just because the landlord is asking them to move doesn't mean that they can just be removed without any review by the court.
Another very important thing, always deal with the landlord in writing. Insist on getting a written lease. Insist on written receipts. Insist on paper trails for everything. If you make a request to the landlord, put it in an email. Don't do it verbally. They can later say, I don't remember that conversation. We see that happen. I just had a hearing yesterday where somebody flat denied that they ever took payment in cash from two people who had matching and consistent testimony that no, we met this person in the parking lot and we gave them $925 cash. And now he's saying that he's not going to honor that agreement and he's going to enforce the writ of possession that's going to execute would have executed today, were it not for the emergency motion that we had to file and fight out in court yesterday. Make sure there's a paper trail. Email is always your friend. If you find a landlord that refuses to do that doesn't want to cooperate through email or through writing, that's a big red flag. If you have the option, rent from somewhere else. That's not a person that's wanting to do good business in the first place.
I'm going off of that, even if your landlord kind of insists on not responding to you in writing, that's not stopping you from sending them emails or sending them a letter, anything like that. If you do send stuff, take a picture of it, keep a record, but your side of stuff is always best done in writing. That when you get a written lease, make sure you look at it. There are some things that I was even surprised are in leases, like you can't have overnight guests for more than a certain amount of nights per month or per year, otherwise it could be considered another tenant and you can get evicted for that. Just little things like that. I know leases are tedious and sometimes things don't make sense, but it's good to look at something, realize you don't understand it, and ask a question, just so that you know there might be something there, rather than not read it and not know what exactly your responsibilities are as a tenant.
Just know if you're there for 12 months, 6 months, or just month to month. There are huge differences in how those play out if you get an eviction notice, both on how long the landlord is required to give you notice and how long you have to stay there, what rights you have under that contract. A lease is a contract. And there are a lot of other things a lot of other kinds of law and principle that applies to a contract other than just what's written down on it. Some things can be completely unenforceable, like a landlord can't just write in anything they want if it contradicts state law or other certain contract principles. That's why it's important to, if you can find a lawyer to review your lease to help you out with a case in case you get an eviction notice. Try to do that, because you may have some really good defenses. Some of the things that the landlord is claiming may not even hold up in court. And just a little bit about terminology. Y'all, we're the people that are used to these terms here are throwing around things like detainer warrant and eviction and notice and all that stuff. An eviction is a long process. It's not any one particular day. It starts off with a termination. It should start off with a termination notice. And that's a notice to you. That can come directly from the landlord. It doesn't come from the court, it doesn't come from the sheriff's department. That's from your landlord. They say, hey, we're notifying you that we plan to end your lease on this day, or you have so many days to get out. That's notice. Now, the next thing that they might file after that is what's called the detainer warrant. It's called a detainer warrant because they are alleging that you're detaining their property from them. Why they call it a warrant, nobody knows. It's a bad name. People think it has something to do with crime. It doesn't. Nobody's getting arrested. It's totally civil. So don't worry about that just because it says warrant on it. A lot of people avoid going to court because they think that it might be having something to do with arrest, especially if they might have some other run-ins with the law or something like that. But always go to your court date if you have one. An eviction is not really done until the landlord has what's called a writ of possession. That doesn't issue until 10 days after the judgment. After you go to court, the judge maybe rules against you and decides that you have to leave. You will at least have 10 days for an appeal period before the landlord can get that writ of possession, which is just a piece of paper that they take to the sheriff's office. And that notifies or allows the sheriff to come out with the deputies and actually set you out, change locks, remove your items, all of that. So hopefully there's a ton of other probably confusing terms with this, but those are some of the big ones to keep straight as y'all are disseminating information out there in the community and just for your own knowledge.
If you don't show up to court and your landlord is there, they will get a default judgment. That means that you will be evicted because you're not there. So it's better to show up. At the same time, if you show up to court and your landlord isn't there, then you can tell the judge, my landlord isn't here, and maybe they'll dismiss the eviction, maybe not. But it's just good to know, both parties need to be there. If the tenant's not there, they'll be evicted. And so something else is always pay your rent. Literally always, no matter what. If you don't have a working shower and the floor is cracked and you have mold and you're like asking the landlord a million times to fix it and they don't fix it, that doesn't mean that you can withhold the rent. You have to pay rent. And unfortunately, we hear a lot of stuff about, people withholding rent maybe on TV, or it's like a common misconception. And so we see a lot of times where people are really living in bad conditions, they withhold rent, and then the landlord ends up just having the right to evict them, which is so wrong. So always pay your rent, keep a record of it. There are ways that you can come back in the end and maybe recover some of the money, but it's always best practice to pay rent and pay on time.
One of the reasons why you see that happening on TV is because a lot of TV is shot, made, or about California or New York, not Tennessee. We have different laws here. It's a landlord-friendly state. We don't like the fact that you can't withhold rent when you have a justified basis for it, when your unit's falling down around your ears. Unfortunately, that's the way the law is. So just one thing on that, always pay your rent. Because if you don't, they've got that non-payment claim, and that can always win in court. So always pay the rent unless a lawyer or a judge has told you you can't. You don't have to. The only two exceptions for that. So, it's much easier said than done to advise people, just pay your rent. We know that it becomes impossible for some folks.
Something important to know is that there are certain things that your landlord has to provide to you, and if they don't, the court could get involved and order them to do so. That's things like heat in the winter, air conditioning in the summer, water, electricity. If you're having major issues with this, you should absolutely call a lawyer, call legal aid, see if there's something that we could do about it, because, that there are some minimum requirements that a landlord has to provide to tenants that are considered emergencies that, you can't wait on. And it's something where we could hopefully go to court, get the judge to order them to fix it, and then you'll be back living in at least a minimally habitable home where you have all these essentials. Because, even today, if you didn't have working air conditioning and you were supposed to and your landlord didn't fix it, it would be really, really hot, and you might have a child or someone with a medical condition, and that's not something worth waiting on. So definitely that's something worth calling a lawyer about, just to see if anybody can help.
You gotta pay for a lawyer?
Now if you call legal aid and you qualify, and we're able to help. Our services are free.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, everybody.
So what qualifies a person to be serviced by legal aid of East Tennessee?
Usually it's income. If you're below a certain income or within a certain margin of that income line. We have other programs, like if you're for age, or we have a mental health legal partnership with the McNabb Center, where we work with some of the people that are their clients. We have a partnership there. We have some other grants that enable us to help people regardless of income or age or other issues. But that, on an individual basis, we just have to meet the person and see if they qualify for some program or some way that we can help.
So if you call, you'll go through kind of a questionnaire on how many people are in your house, your income, all these things, and then, if you do qualify, you'll be put through to find out if we can help you on the legal issue that you have.
I'm holding in my hand a 20+ page paper, and I'm Brianna, by the way. I'm sure you know, both y'all probably know my name. And I know y'all won't discuss the specifics of my case, and that's fine, because I've been very vocal and very public about my situation. I've been on the news, I think all 3 stations here in Knoxville. But I'm holding this paper right here. See how thick this is? This came in an email where legal aid denied me help right before Thanksgiving. Pulled the rug from up under me, told me the Tuesday before Thanksgiving that y'all would help me continue with the case I was needing help with, and then the Wednesday before said, no, we're not gonna help you. I qualified, I needed help. I've been railroaded by my prior landlord. The help I received from legal aid before this denial letter was completely subpar, and as a result of that, me and my 5 children have been homeless since January 17th, with no end in sight. The little girl that was sitting here, I don't know how many of you all saw her, that's one of my children, that's my 3rd child. You all are the only organization that's pro bono here in Knoxville. Everybody refers indigent clients to legal aid of East Tennessee. So who do you turn to when legal aid won't help you and you don't have any money to pay for an attorney, and You qualify for the help. You are also partnered with Knox County, because Wendy, you guys spoke about the partnerships and the money that was coming from the county, I believe. You all allow these landlords, specifically mine, to evict people while they were in possession of that COVID rent money, which was against federal law.
Facts.
How can you all stand here in front of me, this is a slap in my face, stand here in front of me, my child and my community, and say y'all here to help people,
Facts.
and y'all got me and my kids living in roach-infested hotels. And I'm still battling these people in court by myself. And I'm articulate and educated. And I'm stronger than 99% of the people I know. I can't imagine somebody that doesn't have the common book sense that I have and the strength that I have to be dealing with this mess. Anybody else would have jumped off the bridge by now. So, you know, what do y'all have to say for yourselves?
I agree. Y'all been up for battling.
Ma'am,
Y'all been battling. Big
we're
break.
extremely sorry that this is
And
happening.
then I want to add, I went to court representing myself, because you know, in this letter, y'all told me I've got a legal right to represent myself. I know that. I went to law school for a year and a half. I know I have a legal right to represent myself, but I also know when I need help. So I'm battling these people while I'm on the street trying to keep my kids fed, keep us stabilized, keep us together, and I'm being charged for rent that taxpayers have already covered and paid for. Being harassed was in this email y'all sent me too. Y'all said that my landlord wasn't harassing me. But what is harassment? Because when I looked up Tennessee Code and that's not what it said. My landlord came into my house several times without my knowledge, without permission, without good reason, even walked in and scared my children at least twice. Those were just the times they got caught. So by Tennessee state law, what is the definition of landlord harassment? And like I said, I'm battling these people by myself and being hit with a $15,000 judgment for damages that I'm not responsible for, because y'all left me to fall to the wayside. Y'all threw me and my kids to the wolves. So, what y'all standing up here for? That's the real question.
Facts.
Man, we're a small part of, we hate a lot of this that's happened. I hate the situation that you're describing. This is a thing that we are trying to work to prevent every day. We're a small part of this system. Unfortunately, I hate it that we are the only place that you can turn to if you don't have the finances to afford to hire your own lawyer. But
It's not enough money to get enough to
exactly.
turn.
And that's
the situation.
right.
We
And
have
that's why
severe-
that's why my landlord was able to file 5 to 6 evictions against me, detainer warrants against me in a calendar year span, because y'all are considered y'all consider yourselves overworked and underpaid, and y'all do the job according to the opinion on where you work.
I'm sorry, we're a limited resource. We can only handle so many cases at once. The real problem is the fact that there are so many cases that are happening. The real problem is that there is no limit to how quickly and how much a landlord can raise somebody's rent, and no real enforceable way to prevent a landlord
So you're
to
talking about
uphold
legislation.
codes.
Legislation is what we're talking about now.
That could be
Yes,
great.
yes.
That could be great. We
Yes.
can't advocate
Which
for
we're
stuff
not
for
allowed
that,
under funding.
for particular policy.
This wasn't about my rent being raised. This is about my prior landlord being in possession
Watch
of
your
federal
individual.
funding.
We can't. I don't
That's
know
fine.
what.
I'm gonna talk about it. I ain't got nothing to hide. And then y'all turned around and helped this landlord get a second round of payments through Knox Housing Assistance, that program. Said, well, we've done what we could. Deuces to you, we closing your case. I repeatedly emailed, because you sent a couple of smart ass emails back to me, Emily. I never forget an enemy. And you know, I kept asking for help. I'm like, no, they're still bothering me. They're harassing me. They're coming in my house. They stole my son's shoes. I mean, they won't make repairs. I'll call the city. I've done everything I can. And then when they file another eviction, y'all say, oh, but we can't do anything until they file another detainer warrant. As soon as they file a detainer warrant, I run it up there to you all. And then, like I said, and I can pass this around to y'all. Who wants to see this email? Since we passing around documents, I can pass this around too and let y'all read. Here, let me get this on.
Brianna, are you looking for them to revisit your case to actually like help out with this?
Yes, I am in desperate need of an attorney. I filed an appeal
Can y'all not
and asked for a jury
Can y'all
trial.
not review her case like
They refused.
Our management is in charge of things after things are closed. So if something happened, there's a grievance procedure that clients or former clients can go through, and then that would be up to management after
Can y'all
conversation
Can we
on
speak
that.
after the meeting?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, can
we'll see what we
y'all speak and
we'll see
like,
what we can do.
but we have a room full of people saying, you know, this system needs support. So if y'all could step up and be advocacy within your institution, right? Because your institution, but also, let's think about this. Your institution,
Common sense.
management, how many black people are management?
No.
Right. Because think about if there's not a lot of people of color, nobody from a working class background.
Right.
Systemically, you are also perpetuating oppression just by the fault of your institution, right? So if you are within this institution, yes, we're fighting oppression externally, right? But inside is also your responsibility as good folks to be like, how can we make sure we are helping our organization progress? Right now, you have an opportunity of a case that seems to be unjust to step up and say, all right, we are going to personally do what we can to make sure this person's case is reviewed and have the support that they need.
And that's what I'm offering to
Talk
Brianna,
after,
is
yeah.
to talk
Say
afterward
it
and see if there's
again, I don't
something
think
we
they
can do.
heard. Say it again.
Yeah.
As far as what you're addressing, I absolutely agree with you, okay? But we cannot be that advocate for policy and
No, I'm
legislation.
not. I'm
You're
not
advocates
I'm
for court.
I'm talking about advocate within your own organization to get her
I'm with you on
Yes.
that.
Right.
We are actively trying to find ways to have more people
Now
that
for
look
everybody,
like our community.
now for everybody else, Brianna, when's your next court date? Do you want,
They haven't set one yet because I asked for a
do
jury
you want people
trial.
to come up to your court date?
I do. I would love somebody to come in there by
Is there a
myself.
way we can communicate her court date so folks know we can all
Let me
attend?
know, Brianna, yeah.
Show up.
absolutely.
We show up.
Yeah.
Yeah, we show up.
Cool. So look at that, y'all. We have the folks who just committed to advocate within the organization for the case. And we're gonna make sure that we're connected enough to know that whenever her court case comes up, we're gonna go and attend and be supportive.
I try to take more cases than I probably can handle. So does Michael. Both of us are known for that, and we do as much as we can without taking
We
cases
appreciate
and then
that.
being a
But
horrible
things
lawyer.
sometimes slip through the cracks. And when
Yes,
folks tell you to
100%.
slip through the cracks,
And I
it's
trust
on y'all to be
every
like,
day
all right, let's do
we
something.
think about this because this is our job day in and day out to
Sure.
try to keep people from being homeless. And we
don't have the ability to take every case every time that this happens.
No, we
Really just want
understand.
people
But this
to
is the case where homie was accepted.
This
and
is not a
denied,
situation
right?
that
So like,
any part of the
this is a
system
particular,
created.
this is the particular situation where somebody was accepted and then kicked off.
We're
so.
talking this case, right here in our
but
case,
it's
right
very
Yeah.
common.
Y'all are underfunded and we do not have enough legal resources as a community. We understand this. We're not expecting you to do miracle stuff. Say when you see something that you can have an impact on, like right now, that y'all taking on y'all personal accountability to do that. So yeah, you can't do
That
miracles.
hurts,
Yes.
believe me.
So
Yes.
I do want to quickly kind of introduce this petition at this point, because if there's one thing that we want to bring people together to do here, it's to say that every single tenant facing eviction in Knox County should get legal support, should get legal counsel. Right now, those 3.7 detainer warrants being filed every single day, we just don't have what it takes. And outside of this, the city and the county are not funding right now the amount of need that we have. We're not just calling for access to legal counsel as well. We're calling for what they have in Nashville, which has a robust housing navigator program where they have partnered with local nonprofits, Spanish-speaking nonprofits, and nonprofits that can do things that some of the institutional organizations can't do, to serve as housing navigators, where they will send people out to the community, places where we know there is high risk of eviction, get people into the system early in the process so people aren't having to deal with those court dates even. We're getting people support before then, plus we're getting them guaranteed legal counsel on their court date. So we're trying to send this around and set up meetings with decision makers on the city and the county level to say, we have demonstrated community support for this. This is something that needs to happen because people are slipping through the cracks in terrible and unjust ways. And that's hundreds of people every month.
Can I just say one thing about what other cities have done? Right? Legal aid does what it does, is constrained to do what it does, and I hear what, but there are cities where there's no income limits. There are cities where the right to counsel programs don't limit the kinds of proceedings you can bring, right? Like, read that housing guide, carry it around. The bottom line is our law sucks, right? Our state law is awful. Tenants have very few rights. So, you know, there are jurisdictions out there that are getting, you know, money in place, laws in place to get really broad, non-limited right to counsel to enforce laws, which hopefully turns into conversations about how bad the law is. So I don't, you know, I just wanted to say, right, that's not beyond at least my hopes for all of this, but, you know, I'm just a lawyer who can help do some of this technical work, but I can't do, right? Adam and I talk about this all the time, right? We have no power to negotiate anything without the power of the community to ask for it. So, you know, so I think I would like to go big.
We ain't gonna lie, we burnt out on excuses at this point. What we just need is for the systematic overhaul change. I'm running for office. I know things like New York brought in a very strong tenant right policy with capping the rent, cracking down on slumlords, just various things that can definitely be implemented here. And it's not that difficult. What the issue is we have the wrong people in office, and it still comes back to the voting. And so unless you want me to about the voting and putting people in office who are really going to make these changes, we're wasting time, period, in this room right now. Because fighting on the outside can only do so much. And he's already admitted that legislation is part of the key process, or litigation, which is clearly not working as well. And so at this point, what are we going to do about the system? I am done talking about the problem. We need to start moving towards resolution, whatever that looks like.
Could I propose we go to that? We have a whole segment, a 10-minute segment on that.
Come on,
so we'd
yeah,
like
I
to do it.
Yeah.
So, I love that you brought up the New York program because that is like the apex of programs, and one of the defining characteristics of it is that it's not run by lawyers, and they actually didn't go to politicians at first because they thought, you know what, politicians are going to be targets. We want people who are going to be highly critical to have this movement turn out in front of them. So it was totally community based. And then other jurisdictions start to try to do the same thing, and like Cleveland, for example, has their own RTC program. It was not as heavily involved with the community, and so it's pretty limited without that. I mean, it's still a good program, but like Professor Bach was saying, some of these are some of these are full programs where you don't have to make a certain amount of money or have a family to qualify, and some of them are less awesome. Yeah, robust would be a good word, but that's why we're here today, and I can definitely see why. I can see how it would be like, oh, you're coming in here and telling us what to do, but it's like, well, also, like, we're asking, like, we need this, and so all we can do is really kind of just like, I'm not even a lawyer, so don't be like, let me just explain that right now, I know very, very little, but we are researching it, right, and we're trying to learn what we can, and like, I totally think you're right that the policy aspect is a big side of it, but the community aspect is also a really big side of it. And so if we can get that, and we're working with the geography department also to get that data to track like the gentrifying effects, to track how the evictions are reflecting the systemic racism in the community. And so while it's really, really frustrating, and I totally agree with you, I also would really love for us to all kind of come together and try to push this forward, because I think we could get it moving forward. But then again, like I said, I didn't hear the
Yeah, so the next thing then was this petition, which we've already passed around and introduced, and I think, I don't think I could have thought of a better way for it to be introduced actually, is like showing the actual conflict going on here, like, because it is true, like, they're being forced to fail and they're going to continue to fail, and whether or not they drop the ball past that is up to them, but like, yeah, I mean, it's just going to keep happening until we fix it. And so for the next thing is we want to organize more meetings like this, where we can have talks like this and conversations like this. And so we're hoping people will sign up for planning meetings and for getting things organized beyond the scope of SOCM, beyond the scope of PSL and DSA, that people will have these conversations on their own. We're going to need outreach and canvassing for all of these things and people to organize those things, to give them the papers that they're taking out. We're also going to need, I think it would be of enormous benefit if we could create study circles or action groups, however you want to think of them, where we can get together, we can study this guy, and we can talk about the future and about all the things that we can do in your community to make sure that your immediate neighbors and the other people around you are safe. And because there's a ton you can do and there's more to do. There's just so much more you can do.
Another thing is if this were to go through, again, the successful movements, keep the tenants involved, keep the community involved. So it's not, okay, now we're turning it. One thing that I read in the New York, I think it was New York, one of them was that the lawyers didn't come in until the program was implemented. And so there was kind of some resentment there as far as, okay, now we want to throw our 2 cents in as far as how we want to participate. But there are other programs where they set up entire councils made of tenants, and the tenants make the decisions on how the programs run. So I think that's kind of also an aspect of
I was going to close this with something with my friend Rick. Many of you know Rick, who's a community elder. He couldn't be here tonight. I think he could use your light and your love right now. So keep him in your thoughts, send him a message. And thank you all for being here today. And please get some food on the way out. If there's still food left, then feel free to hang out for a while and have some conversation. Thank you all.